The film begins with a bunch of people preparing to commit horrible things. These are the country's most sought terrorists, led by Raymond. Raymond is so outspoken that he declared war on the government on television. To make matters worse, he held some soldiers as prisoners. The government did not take this lightly and swiftly dispatched its strongest soldiers to rescue the captives. Arjun leads this group and does an excellent job. They'd all devised a plot to take the terrorists by surprise. During their quest, Arjun encounters a civilian with a bomb all over his body. One of Raymond's men pushed this poor guy to blow the device when Arjun and his squad arrived. Arjun is a brave man who attempts to calm the victim down while also disarming the explosives. Finally, he tells the young man to leave immediately to ensure his safety. Shortly after their assignment, Raymond's troops returned, resulting in a skirmish. Even though they annihilated his entire army, they were unable to locate Raymond himself. So Arjun told his crew to go home. However, as Arjun exited the building, he spotted a suspicious hole in the wall. He smashed it and discovered Raymond cowering inside. Finally, they apprehended Raymond and imprisoned him. After a year, Arjun was at the airport when he unexpectedly ran into a woman who was in a rush. She nearly fell, but he swiftly assisted her. However, the woman kissed him, surprising Arjun. The woman apologized and went, but he could not stop thinking about her. It came out that the woman was Aisha, a flight attendant. Arjun and Aisha wound up on the same plane, and he couldn't stop staring at her. It seems that the earlier kiss had caused him to fall in love with her. However, Aisha was ashamed when she noticed Arjun was looking at her. Arjun didn't want to pass up an opportunity, so he mustered the bravery to meet Aisha. She first did not believe Arjun was an officer, so he instantly showed her photographic documentation of him in his uniform. Following this, she became convinced and began to fall in love with him. After exchanging phone numbers, Arjun and Aisha became closer as they spent more time together and realized they were compatible. They ultimately began officially dating. Arjun went to the airport to pick up Aisha and surprised her with a bouquet of white flowers. However, their joy was short-lived when terrorists unexpectedly attacked everyone at the airport. As an officer, Arjun took on the task of fighting the terrorists alone, while Aisha, a flight attendant, attempted to evacuate people to safety. Despite his gallant efforts, Arjun was shot in the leg, making him weak and vulnerable. Aisha, who was also shot, ran to aid him but was unable to defend herself against the attackers. As a result of the sad tragedy, Aisha died, leaving Arjun in serious condition. He was sent to a hospital, where he remained unconscious and feeble. After all of that, Arjun was comatose for about a week, leaving his mother sad. However, a few days later, he began to wake up and screamed out for Aisha, which caused his mother to grieve because she realized she had died. The doctor then came to examine Arjun and informed him that the gunshot wound had shattered his spine, leaving him utterly paralyzed. He was shocked and felt as if he were living in the dark. He even considered injuring himself because he thought his life had no purpose anymore. Fortunately, he had a loving mother who pledged to care for him forever. One morning, Arjun was watching the news on TV when he saw the face of the young man who had led the airport terrorist attack. His name was Hamid, and Arjun recognized him as the individual he had assisted during an ambush on Raymond's headquarters. The announcement also revealed that Hamid was Raymond's biological son. Knowing this, Arjun was speechless and felt unable to fight back. Meanwhile, in another section of town, government officials had assembled for a conference. They were considering a plan to apprehend Hamid, who had been evading them for some time. Among them was a minister named Subramaniam, who made an intriguing idea. He proposed that they utilize individuals with superpowers to catch Hamid. Initially, the other officials regarded this notion ludicrous and laughed it off. However, Subramaniam expanded on his proposal, stating that he knew someone named Dr. Selva, who was actively researching on cutting-edge technology that might be implanted in humans to give them remarkable skills. He speculated that in the future, soldiers could be outfitted with this technology to make it simpler to apprehend Hamid. As he spoke, the other high-ranking officials and ministers began to pay attention and ponder his proposal. In another section of town, Arjun was deep in meditation when someone struck him from behind and covered his lips. He was unable to fight back because his body was entirely paralyzed. To make matters worse, the thugs assaulted Arjun's mother and took her ring. Fortunately, they saved their lives and fled. At the time, Arjun was upset since he felt powerless as a police officer and son to protect his own mother. The next day, Subramaniam received clearance from government officials to utilize superhuman measures to apprehend Hamid. He immediately met with Dr. Salva to talk about the technologies required for this strategy. He provided Dr. Salva a list of potential warriors to acquire the superhuman technology. Dr. Salva, on the other hand, rejected all of the applications because she considered her technology was better suited to helping people with disabilities rather than fighting. She said that if her method was applied to a crippled person, they would gain incredible strength. On the other hand, if it were applied to a normal individual, they might become crippled. When Subramaniam heard this, he was immediately reminded of his friend Arjun, who was paralyzed. Without hesitation, he went straight to Arjun's residence and informed him that he had a task for him to capture someone named Hamid. Arjun was initially upset by his situation, but Subramaniam revealed that he had a plan to tie him to a sophisticated technological instrument that would allow him to recuperate and grow significantly stronger. After hearing this, Arjun accepted to the assignment and asked his mother's permission and blessings before leaving with Subramaniam. When they arrived at their destination, Dr. Seba discussed the hazards of the operation to Arjun. Despite having no other options, Arjun accepted to the operation without hesitation. Finally, the operation started. After the operation, Arjun regained consciousness, but he was still unable to move and was in great discomfort. Dr. Saba stated that this was a natural reaction caused by the technology's ongoing synchronization with his brain. As the agony lessened, Dr. Saba instructed Arjun to move his hand, which was difficult at first, but eventually he gained control of his body. Then he tried walking, but it took him some time to adjust to the new technology. Over the next 3 days, Arjun worked hard to train his body and adjust to the technology. He eventually recovered completely thanks to his unwavering drive. Dr. Saba then connected him to superhuman technology, granting him access to government data such as wanted and criminal lists. One night, Arjun went to the city center to exact revenge on the criminals who had broken into his home and abused his mother. Using the technology within him, he was able to immediately locate the burglars and proceeded directly there. As Arjun got on the scene, the robber became afraid when he realized he could walk. Then he confidently sought the return of his mother's wedding band, which had been taken the day before, but the robber refused and instead challenged Arjun to fight. Without hesitation, Arjun overpowered the robber and retrieved his valuable ring. He was eager to go, but he was stopped by the robber's accomplices, who attempted to gang up on him. Undeterred, he engaged all of them in a heated brawl and emerged triumphant. However, he observed the oncoming cops and decided to make a fast getaway to avoid more difficulties. Later, Arjun took refuge with Dr. Seba, but his attempt to avoid Subramaniam's notice was unsuccessful, as Subramaniam chastised him for his reckless actions. Subramaniam reminded Arjun that the technology she installed in him was intended to arrest Hamid, not to inflict murder on innocent bystanders. Arjun said that he had merely fought back against robbers who had stolen from his house and chased after his disabled mother. He'd assured Subramaniam that he would soon capture Hamid. As the day progressed, it became clear that a government building would be the next target for Hamid's group's covert strike. Meanwhile, Dr. Saba was his route to the same building to address the most recent developments in Arjun's condition. Shortly later, a fleet of trucks arrived, revealing Hamid's undercover operatives disguised as the minister's assistants. They asked the guards for permission to enter, but the guards, who were quite rigid about protocol, wanted authorization from the central guard in the control room. Unexpectedly, another member of Hamid's squad kidnapped the guard at the control center, forcing him to grant unlawful entry to the disguised men. Soon after, all trucks were permitted to enter with Hamid and his forces already inside, ready to unleash chaos and destruction on the government buildings. On the other hand, Arjun contemplated how to apprehend Hamid. Then he unexpectedly acquired critical information from the advanced technology implanted in his body. He realized that Hamid and his guys were now inside a government facility. Without delay, he contacted Subramaniam to provide the information he had obtained. Fortunately, Subramaniam was not yet present at the building because he was due to meet with Dr. Selva. Suddenly, the building was hit by a missile, putting everyone in risk. The security officers jumped into action, ensuring the president's protection while Hamid's troops started an attack on the building. Soon later, the terrorists overpowered all of the guards and seized the president prisoner. They'd also imprisoned hundreds of innocent people. Meanwhile, Arjun and his crew prepared to rescue the prisoners and capture all of Hamid's forces. Following the incident, all government officials had an emergency conference to discuss the situation and devise a plan of action. Shortly later, it became clear that Arjun had come with his elite warriors and encircled the structure. Meanwhile, inside the building, Hammond attempted to negotiate with government officials, demanding that all troops be withdrawn. He threatened to kill 50 hostages unless his demands were granted. However, if the government agreed to his request, he pledged to release the captives. The officials promptly pondered on the problem, and Subramaniam proposed withdrawing all troops except Arjun. At the moment, Subramaniam persuaded the others that Arjun was more than capable of managing the issue on his own because he possessed superhuman power equal to that of 100 troops. After hearing this, the higher-ups approved the idea, and all troops were removed, leaving Arjun to confront the crisis alone. Arjun then made his move, entering into the building through the vents. While Hammond assumed that all of the troops had fled, he fulfilled his pledge by freeing 50 prisoners. Meanwhile, Subramaniam told Arjun to hack into the CCTV system so they could observe the scenario inside the building. Arjun rapidly accomplished the assignment and defeated Hammond's forces, who were defending the CCTV control area. Meanwhile, Hammond submitted a second plea to the government. He requested that his father, Raymond, be released in exchange for the president's release. When Subramaniam learned of this, he advised the other officials to buy their time because he was convinced that Arjun was already taking steps to address the matter. On the other hand, Hammond's men were threatening Dr. Selva. She thought the situation was becoming more serious, so she called Arjun from her smartwatch. Shortly after, Arjun found her, but Subramaniam told him not to take any action because it could compromise the hostage's safety. However, he was motivated to assist Dr. Selva because she had previously saved his life from paralysis. Long story short, Arjun defeated all of Hammond's men who were threatening Selva. After effectively neutralizing the threat, he transported Dr. Selva to a safe area. Shortly later, Hammond arrived on the site and was startled to see that all of his guys had been killed. However, this is when he knew there was still a member of the military working against him. Unfortunately, Arjun was apprehended, but he swiftly contacted Hammond and bluffed that he would arrest him, just as he had Raymond. Hammond recognized the infiltrator was Arjun, the same person who had arrested his father. To demonstrate his intent, he killed one of the hostages. Knowing this made the government uneasy. Therefore, they ordered Raymond's release. Meanwhile, Subramaniam was upset about what had happened, so he contacted Arjun and asked him to assassinate Hammond. Arjun then pretended to surrender in order to get closer to Hammond, but one of Hammond's soldiers attacked him from behind, breaking his technological machine. He then fainted. Fortunately, Dr. Selva received a signal on her smartwatch, indicating that the machine had been damaged, and she instantly opened her laptop and attempted to repair it remotely. Dr. Selva eventually succeeded in recovering the technology, but Arjun remained unconscious. Raymond, on the other hand, was imprisoned and awaiting his release by police. Soon later, he boarded a plane bound for his hometown. Meanwhile, Hammond had asked the authorities to arrange an airplane for him to fly to Ecuador. While unconscious, Arjun continued to dream, and in his dream, he met his girlfriend Aisha. She told him that she was gone, but she had come to his dream to express her love for him. After hearing these words in his dream, Arjun recovered consciousness and instantly fought back against all of Hammond's troops. Arjun eventually defeated all of Hammond's men, but he quickly realized that the location had been bombed. Then he swiftly contacted Subramaniam, informing him that Hammond was likely to blow up the place remotely. Arjun ordered Subramaniam to stop Hammond's automobile since it housed the bomb's remote control. However, when the soldiers attempted to halt the car, they discovered that Hammond had already moved to another car. In this frightening circumstance, Arjun discovered a hole that went to the exterior of the structure. He explored the tunnel and escaped on a motorcycle. Then he pursued Hammond, using technology to rapidly determine his location. On the other side, Hammond had arrived at the airport and was preparing to board his flight. The jet was about to take off, but then Arjun emerged on his motorcycle and drove towards it. Arjun noticed the plane preparing to take off and rode his motorcycle directly into it, causing it to crash and not take off. Arjun had a vendetta against Hammond and beat him to death on the spot. After killing Hammond, Arjun immediately snatched the bomb's remote control case and attempted to defuse it. He successfully defused the explosive utilizing his knowledge and expertise. When it was determined that the device had been defused, the president and the other hostages were able to safely exit the building. Meanwhile, Raymond, who had boarded the plane, did not return home. His location remained unclear. The movie concludes, The moral message of this video is that you should never help someone who is wearing a bomb, since it could lead to falling in love, being shot, and becoming crippled.